Thank you. I think I'll speak in English out of respect for the ambassador's difficult work and also for the remaining standard bearer of English, the English language in the EU, Ireland. Now, speaking as a Greek, I would say that what comes in mind is that the Brexit referendum happened 1 year after the Greek referendum, and the case of the Brexit referendum comes to show that self-harm via referendum by plebiscite mandate is not just the prerogative of poorer economies or desperate societies. I believe that Brexit will damage the UK seriously, at least in the foreign policy domain in terms of its role and impact in the European Union and Europe and the world, but it has certainly dealt a terrible blow for the European Union. It's the first moment when Europe is not moving forward. It's not enlarging, it's not deepening, it is losing a member, it is disintegrating, and in fact the Commission has produced the most unambitious and feeble white paper in its history. And this is not as a result of Brexit alone, but certainly Brexit has had its role in that. So the precedent is terrible, and this and the moral hazard that the Brexit represents is leading both sides, both Britain and the EU, to a self-damaging path. Which has been already outlined to an extent, because the UK government cannot accept a softer Brexit, which would imply accepting the single market, free movement, ECJ jurisdiction, payments to the EU budget. But the EU also, and I believe that our friends from the UK can understand that, cannot accept to set a precedent whereby any member state can sort of pressure for a la carte membership, for cherry picking what we like and we don't like, and in fact, cannot politically afford to make Brexit an economic or political success, because then there will be more to follow. And this is a very clear element in the entire negotiation strategy and structure. Therefore, both sides, for political reasons, are locked in an incentive structure that leads them towards a nasty or a messy divorce. And then comes the combination of Brexit with Trump. And that is the Western system's absolute nightmare. Of course, it is no fault of the Brexiters that Mr. Trump was elected in the US, but together these two are tearing apart the two main pillars of our Western liberal order, the US and the EU. And the UK, I'm sorry to say, seems to have traded a partnership of equals with advanced democratic countries in order to become, in the eyes of the new tenant of the White House, the junior partner of Mr. Trump, and a protectionist, for that matter, to boot, even though Brexit was about free trade and liberalizing trade. In other words, the UK seems to have decided to terminate a long and tedious and boring and at times troublesome marriage in order to surrender itself to the hands of an abusive lover, and an egotistic one, for that matter. So, and that's, of course, very bad for the UK, but it's also very bad for Europe. And it's a real negative-sum game, because from the enlightened self-interest that people like Mario Monti have outlined in the past, we're now back to the era of petty national selfishness. And guess what? This is the most short-sighted way to advance national interest, as the entire post-war experience of the liberal order has shown us. Because when you are shrinking global public goods, from which individual nations can draw, and more powerful nations can draw even more from them, then there is even much less to draw, fewer benefits to draw upon. And at the end of the day, we're all worse off. And understanding the world in zero-sum terms leads, in fact, to a negative-sum set of outcomes, to negative-sum outcomes. And some in Greece thought that Greece loses and the Eurozone wins, and there are opinion polls that tend to demonstrate that there is a very sizable part of our compatriots in Greece who believe that the European Union has gained more from Greece's membership than Greece itself, which in my mind is absolutely absurd. And in the UK, there have been people who believe that the EU was winning at the expense of Britain. And in the US, the mercantilistic view that the US loses out against countries with which it has a trade deficit also underlines the new political reality that we have in the White House. And all this frame of thinking leads to confrontation and conflict that tears up bonds of mutual cooperation and mutual gain, and disrupts the continuity of global institutions that are so necessary for a Western liberal order. And the zero-summers are helping turn a world of win-win, of positive sum, into a negative-sum world. But of course, the international trade system, as Kevin has pointed out, and the European single market, have become so integrated over the course of the decades that they cannot be disentangled. And this does not only concern the classic engineering industries, such as cars or aircrafts or planes that depend on cross-border supply chains. They also have to do with our economic and financial and commercial lives in general. They have to do with sectors such as food or banking or tourism and so forth. And this return to narrow-minded national egoism is creating expectations that will never, in fact, be able to be fulfilled because it is simply impossible to disentangle not only the single market, but even the liberal international order. Trump said America first, but Britain said it first, Britain first. And now what's next? Is France next? Is Le Pen going to say La France avant tout? And one annus horribilis of 2016 was enough for the UK and for the US to unlearn, it seems, the history lessons of the entire 20th century. And I'm greatly disappointed to be making this point. Now, at an immediate level, and Kevin mentioned that, Brexit united the EU27, even if that was around a timid and lukewarm text such as that we saw in Bratislava. But on the longer run, I believe there's little doubt that the negotiation of Brexit will be toxic, and the politics of it the politics that it will be unleashing will be ugly. And the precedent of an exit of a member state will weigh very heavily upon the European Union. It is clear that intergovernmentalism is on the rise. It had been already strengthened previously during the crisis, but it is even stronger as a result of Brexit. And there's little doubt that Brexit has also exacerbated the asymmetry of power inside the European Union. Without the UK, the imbalance between Germany and France appears even greater than it was. And that, I was asked by Kevin to make a comment about what that implies for Greece from the standpoint of any small integrationist or peripheral member state. This is a very negative development. Any development that weakens the supranational European institutions at the benefit of intergovernmentalism is a very negative development. Now, the other thing that I would like, I cannot resist commenting upon, is the rise of plebiscital politics. And the irony there is that the UK has always been a model of representative democracy, and representative institutions are there to filter the kind of the heated popular will, to elaborate and formulate difficult questions that are not easily reducible to a yes or no, to weigh trade-offs, and to sometimes go against the heated popular will in order to be able to act for the benefit of the longer-term interest of the country. And it seems to me that all this kind of disappeared with Brexit. A decision, probably the most important constitutional decision in the UK, was taken with a one-off referendum with a majority of 52 versus 48. There was not even a kind of reinforced majority as a prerequisite. There was not even a prerequisite of participation. There was no logic of a double majority or a second round or a parliamentary formulation of that. There was nothing. It was just a one-off. And this, I think, is a very dangerous precedent for Europe. And it comes also in the light of the precedent that was created in the country with the Greek referendum in 2015. Because it's very easy to scapegoat the European Union at the national level for everything on which national governments have failed to act effectively over the years. And it is very much the case that the losers of globalization or of integration are not losers of the European project. They are the losers that are created as a result of the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness of national governments to be able to integrate them inside the system and to extend a kind of safety net as Europe had been able to do in the past and hasn't been able to do so over the last 2 or 3 decades. And we now have the politics of scapegoating the most permanent status quo in Europe, which is the European Union institutions. Because whereas national governments change, alternate, and therefore their alternation diffuses popular discontent, the EU is always there. So it is the most convenient target for scapegoating for any kind of populist demagogic politicians. And I believe that this resort to referenda is introducing a kind of entropy in European integration. How can member states proceed to make lasting commitments, such as building common institutions in the Eurozone, pooling sovereignty, mutualizing liabilities, building common budgets for stabilization, all the things that are required to make the euro sustainable if the exit option overhangs as a potential result of any flimsical referendum in any member state without any kind of filters or guarantees that this could be examined and taken as a decision much more systematically and serious. Now, you cannot build a single currency with a mentality of currency pegging or depegging in mind. You cannot have a monetary union with a revolving door where anyone can exit. And I say that being fully aware that, of course, the core crisis of the EU is not Brexit, it is the Eurozone itself, and the reason why this remains a crisis, again, is not because of Brexit, it is because of the unwillingness or the lack of political determination of the main member states in the Eurozone to find a common agreement. And that is the main source of vulnerability in the European Union, but Brexit has accentuated that. How much do I have? I'm done. So I would be very happy as a European, as a friend of Britain, to see this evolving into a less hard Brexit. And there is perhaps a way to doing so. This has been proposed by pro-European think tanks. The EU could unilaterally indicate that it is willing to extend the negotiating period beyond the stated 2 years so as to allow the next parliament to reformulate the question and to lead to a softer Brexit. And perhaps, and this is an issue that I would pose more as a question rather than a proposal, the UK might have a point, also in the previous government, in seeking some control over the movement of labour, which has been a matter of concern. Article 48 of the original Treaty of Rome states that the freedom of movement for workers has to be promoted with a balance between supply and demand in the employment market in mind, and this has been a principle that has been reproduced by the Treaty of Lisbon. It seems to me that this path towards a more managed migration could be a way to move along the path of a softer Brexit for the benefit of the European Union and maybe perhaps for that of the UK as well. Thank you very much.